passed a law. I don't know if you know about this, but anybody who owns foreign stocks, even if you own them in America, you have to give the government a list of all your foreign stock holdings every year when you file your tax return, so they can log which Americans own foreign stocks and how many shares they own. Now, why do you think they're doing that?
Yeah, I know. Not just out of innocent curiosity.
They know when their money has no value, they need to start seizing the assets of their citizens in the name of the common good, or for for the better of all the comrades. We need to do this, and that is something that's really, really scary.
Well, at that point, this is why when people say to me, we can't have nullification because, gosh, wouldn't that just be chaotic if the states decided that they might not do this or that? I think the current situation is chaotic.
Yeah. Anyway, hey, Tom, we're coming up to a break.
You want to figure out how to do what it wants to do one way or another. I don't need to worry about that.
Do you want to stick
protecting my own liberties?
Tom, we got to take a break. You want to stick around to the next hour?
I can stick around for a segment if you'll have me.
All right, well, hang on.
Okay.
We got more of Peter Schiff and Tom Woods coming up in the second hour of the Peter Schiff Show. And we are back, and I'm talking to Thomas Woods. Before I go back to Tom, just remind everybody that you can also listen to the Peter Schiff Show on the website at schiffradio.com, and you can sign up to be a premium member, listen to the archived versions of the shows, commercial-free, traffic-free, news-free. So if you don't have a lot of time, it's a good way to go. We almost had 20,000 listeners on the website yesterday. I think it was a record day. The traffic has been growing steadily. That's not bad for the third week of the show. And who knows how many people are listening on the airwaves or on the radio station's website. So the audience is growing. It's still small, but it needs to get a lot bigger. Anyway, I'm talking to Tom Woods. Tom, one thing I thought is interesting. I heard that there was a congressman that was asked about the constitutionality of the health care, and not, Nancy Pelosi, who laughed about it when she got the question, but another person tried to answer it. And the answer was, well, there's nothing in the Constitution that says you have a right not to have health insurance. Therefore, he had just assumed that it meant that it was constitutional.
Yeah, so he's got it exactly wrong. The whole point of the Constitution, as everybody at the time said, was that they explicitly list all the federal government's powers, and the whole point of the Ninth Amendment is that if we haven't listed one of your rights, you are nevertheless presumed to have it. The federal government is not presumed to have a power unless it's listed, but we the people are presumed to have rights unless abridged or unless says something.
Yeah, and in fact, most of the states that ratified the Constitution were told at the time that the federal government's powers were limited and defined, few and defined. I would think that now that the courts have said that's not the case, I think a lot of states should be able to get out of it and say, I was led into this contract based on fraud. Here's proof that you told me that the only thing the federal government could do was what was written in this document, and now they're doing whatever they want.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, they say in at least a half a dozen state ratifying conventions, they use the phrase expressly delegated. The federal government has only the powers that are expressly delegated to it. That was the understanding that people went into this thing under. And, it doesn't look to me like health care is expressly delegated. I mean, don't give me this general welfare stuff.
I know. They pervert that clause. They pervert necessary and proper. They say, well, they can do whatever they want if it's necessary and proper. No, they have a specific power. Like, you can have a post office. Okay, well, you can do anything necessary and proper to have a post, like you can build it. So you can order the concrete. You can hire somebody. You can deliver. But it's like it's necessary and proper to carry out the delegated powers. Not that it means, well, you can do whatever the hell you want, even if it's not delegated. If just because you think it's in the general welfare, if they could do everything that they think is in the general welfare, then what's the point of a constitution?
Yeah,
that means they have unlimited power.
Whoever lived thinks that everything he does is for the general welfare. And I mean, just imagine anybody voting to ratify this Constitution if it says, look, hey, we got this clause that pretty much says we can do absolutely anything we want. And even Alexander Hamilton favors a strong central government, centralized power. Even he said in the Federalist Papers that the Constitution would be exactly the same if it didn't even have a necessary and proper clause. He says that's just in there for clarification.
I just wish they were smart enough to take. I wish they were smart enough to take it out back then, because any kind of language, that over time, I always have a dream that I could go back in time to the founding fathers and get them to write it clearly. I know exactly all the ways that it was screwed up, and I would have them write. See, they're writing it for people that are intelligent. They're not writing it for modern Americans. You need to spell it out in Dick meets Jane kind of vocabulary. You know,
and you have to anticipate how ambitious politicians are going to interpret a lot of these seemingly open-ended phrases. I mean, Patrick Henry at the Virginia Ratifying Convention said, look, I'm sorry, but I'm worried about this general welfare clause and how they're going to interpret it. And he was told, oh, don't worry. I mean, only a fool would interpret it the way you're worried that it'll be interpreted.
Yeah, but the problem is we're now a nation of fools. They didn't understand this. With all these schools, with all the education we have now, you know, I was on Fox News today, and this guy was trying to say, there's some people that actually want to abolish the Department of Education. Can you imagine what would happen if we had no more education? Yeah. Like we didn't have any education before the Department of Education. We had a lot better education. People actually learned. In fact, the reason the government wants to educate everybody is so we learn nothing.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, of course. What does the government want other than a nation of complete imbeciles, you know, who you know do nothing other than stare at their navels all day and think everything's fine? Of course, that's what they want. And of course, the Department of Education is such a trivial thing anyway. I mean, what is it? Maybe $50 billion? No,
I think it's about $130 billion. It's $130 billion, but you know, $100 billion here, $100 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking real money.
Pretty soon it's real money. But in other words, there really would be education, even without this 30-year-old department.
But, of course, one of the things that the Department of Education does by subsidizing student loans and now directly authorizing them is they force tuition prices up. So the real cost of this department is not what it spends, but all the bloated tuitions that universities are charging our kids because of these government subsidies.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how government makes things affordable. You make it super high, and then you allow people to go into debt to afford it. That's affordable.
Yeah, that's their strategy for houses. Instead of letting prices come down so that people can afford them, let's artificially prop them up, but subsidize their ability to go into debt so they can buy these houses and be slaves to their mortgage for the rest of their lives.
It would be nice to hear the Republicans actually take on a guy like this and say, look, what you're basically saying, sir, is that the American people are too stupid to run their own schools without being told what to do by their betters in Washington. Why do you think Americans are so stupid they can't run their own local schools without a central department?
Well, yeah, how did we make it? Why
don't they actually fight?
How did we make it to the night? Was it what year is it? 1970 something. We got that department, right?
Yeah, it was under Carter.
Jimmy Carter. I mean, so how did we make it? I mean, we won the Second World War. We came up with the atom bomb. We didn't have any Department of Education. We invented the production line. We had the Industrial Revolution. Thomas Edison. You know, Henry Ford. There was no Department of Education.
And in fact, if you look at those old Regents exams from the 1930s that you had to pass to graduate high school. I mean, there are PhDs who can't pass these things. There was no Department of Education.
Oh, I know. A college degree now isn't even worth what a high school degree used to be. And I mentioned yesterday the problem with all these kids in college is there's so many kids now that are going to college that have no business being there. They're only there because government subsidies are there. If there weren't those subsidies, they couldn't go to college, and they do something that's more lucrative, like learn a trade. I mean, we don't have the skilled craftsmen and tradesmen because the people that would normally go into those occupations are stuck in these government schools running up debts, and then they graduate, they know nothing. Meanwhile, all the good tradesmen are coming in from out of the country.
And you know, it's even worse, I think. I mean, if you could stand there in a college classroom and really see the level of some of these kids, they don't belong in the parking lot of a college. They have no interest in anything you're saying up there, and I mean, none whatsoever. They're just a bunch of drones there because their parents are forcing them to be there, and they're hungover half the time. This is a fact. Any professor, even the leftist professors, will at least admit this much to you, that it frustrates them that the kids don't care, they have no business being there, and that's somehow the untouchable model for growing up.
But then look at the quality of the professors. Look at these Harvard and Princeton and Yale professors who want more stimulus, that want quantitative easing, that think we need bigger deficits. I mean, the professors are that low. I mean, imagine the students.
Yeah, exactly.
And these are at the premier universities.
The professor says that in the old days, the students used to show up with all these economic fallacies in their heads that he had to refute. He says, now I have to actually teach them the fallacies. That's how empty their heads are when they get here.
Well, I would tell people they come when you go to get an economics degree, you come and the job is to knock all the common sense out of your head. Because a lot of economics is just intuitive, and they got to tell you to go against what seems intuitively obvious in favor of these ridiculous formulas that they got.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, one of the great things about the revival of Austrian economics is that you now have a lot of you encourage the natural, smart alecky aspect of the brighter kids, who then want to really give their professors grief and ask them about Austrian business cycle theory and stuff. So some of these professors are walking into their classrooms white as a ghost.
Well, I said, Lawrence O'Donnell, I mentioned on the show yesterday, actually said on television that if we don't raise the debt ceiling, that the entire global economy is going to collapse into a depression.
I heard that too.
The pillar of the global economy is America going deeper into debt. We owe it to the world to go into debt. Without that debt, the whole economy is going to completely collapse.
I don't know. I mean, is there a comment one can make on this?
Have you read the book I wrote, the little one with my brother, How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes?
Yeah, I have.
That's a book I really want to see get out there to the young people, into the colleges and universities and high schools for that matter, because that really puts it in very simple, straightforward terms that anybody can understand. And, you read that little book for 2 or 3 hours, and as far as I'm concerned, you got a PhD in economics. And
even more importantly, you are inoculated against anything that anybody might say to you against it, because it is so commonsensical.
Yeah, and this is just a little tale. I mean, they've got these textbooks that people have, these Keynesian textbooks that are, thick, you can't even read through them with all their complicated, calculus formulas with these charts and graphs and curves, and it's all a bunch of nonsense.
Oh yeah, and what's interesting, Peter, is that they did a study not long ago. How many people actually read the average article in the American Economic Review? The answer is 2.5. Mm-hmm. So if we exclude the publisher and the author, we got like a half a guy.
And all of these universities, all of these highly regarded people, and all this text. How many people could see the real estate collapse coming in 2008, even the beginning? How many could see this recession coming when it was staring him at the face, right in the face?
No, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And it should have been obvious. It should have been obvious. I mean, I wrote in the book, in the little book, I said it's like a weatherman is staring at a Category 5 hurricane right off the coast of Florida, and he says, sunshine. And then we say, okay, let's keep this weatherman on. He's doing a great job. I mean, he's cool. These supposed economic experts are completely worthless. Yeah. They know nothing about economics.
I linked to your book, by the way, on a resource page I made called LearnAustrianEconomics.com, and I list yours as one of just a handful of the intro. Obviously people have to read economics in one lesson, but basically just one of a handful of the intro texts that you ought to read to be an intelligent person. And it does, as you say, it doesn't take a lot of time or effort. Once it's in your head, it's hard to dislodge common sense.
I just wish we can get this book to circulate around Capitol Hill. If we could get more people to read and understand before the actual whole book plays out and we're completely broke, because we are close to that.
Exactly. We don't actually have to live out this book.
No, we've lived out most of it. We just don't have to live out the last quarter of it, right, because we'll all be fishing without nets. That's the problem. Anyway, hey, Tom, I really loved having you as a guest. Appreciate it. And Nullification is the new book. So pick up a copy, and thanks, Tom, for coming on the Peter Schiff Show.
My pleasure, Peter.